and welcome to Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kauschi. Niaga Spotlight goes through the week in business and future affairs, market watch, industries, analysis and insights. We've got you covered right here on Niaga Spotlight. Well, this week on analysis, we're looking at occupational health and safety in Malaysia. Now, as an introduction though, of course, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, OSHA, is the primary law governing occupational safety and health in Malaysia. It was enacted back in 1994 and took effect on February the 24th, 1994. It was initially running parallel with the Factory and Machineries Act 1967 or FMA, which was the occupational safety legislation available at that point in time. Now, under the FMA, the natural emphasis was on safety, while OSHA 1994 began to place emphasis on addressing health hazards in workplaces. So over the years, OSHA 1994 was supported by regulations, industrial codes of practices and guidelines to further supplement provisions in the Act. The Department of Occupational Safety and Health, DOSH, in combination with OSHA, has of course reduced fatal safety hazards and health risks, established simple and common sense standards, and enforces the law against those who put workers at risk. Now, this has saved hundreds of lives and prevented countless injuries and illnesses over the past 30 years. The Occupational Safety and Health Amendment Act 2022, or OSHA 2022, has actually just come into effect as of the 1st of June 2024, and this now further increases the level of safety and health at Malaysian workplaces. I had the opportunity to speak with Salina Binti Tukimin, who is Director for Policy at the International and Research Development Division at the Department of Occupational Safety and Health, DOSH, Malaysia, to better understand the long-awaited 4 pillars of the OSH Amendment Act, as well as new responsibilities of employers towards employees. Let's watch. Good morning, Puan Salina. How are you doing? Thank you so much for making time to join us on Niaga Spotlight.
Okay, good morning, Ms. Tasmina. Thank you very much for inviting me to join your show this morning.
Fantastic. Puan Salina, firstly, of course, let's start off by talking about some of the key changes which have been introduced now by the Occupational Safety and Health, the OSH Amendment Act, which has, of course, just come into force as of 1st June 2024. Okay,
thank you for the question. Let me start with the introduction first. As a department, as a government agency, which is Department of Occupational Safety and Health, we are enforcing the Occupational Safety and Health Act 1994. In short, we call it as Act 514. And this act has been gazetted and enforced by the Department of Occupational Safety and Health since 1994. After more than 25 years of enforcement and due to changes in business landscape, and development in Malaysian economy, and as well as involvement in technology and emerge of various new employment sector have. So all this one will be potential to expose the workers to a new occupational safety and health hazard. So to address this scenario, this is the need to amend the OSHA. Thus, in March 2022, the Occupational Safety and Health Amendment Act has been gazetted, and the enforcement date was 1st June in 2024. In the amendment, if I can explain a little bit, the amendment still remain the principle of the OSHA, and the principle we call it as a self-regulations. Mean those who create the risk, they are responsible to overcome the risk. And among the critical provision under the previous act, we call as a Factory and Machinery Act, will be incorporated into the amendment. And this combination of 2 principles result in the act that is self-regulatory, but will adopt the prescriptive approach for issue involving the use of high-risk machinery. And for this, we will develop more standard and industrial code of practice. And I will explain or share a little bit on the key change introduced by the OSHA amendment. So among others, there are the crucial things that we put in the amendment. Number one is we extend the law coverage from only apply to those industries listed in first schedule in the existing OSHA to all the workplace except those listed in the first schedule. That is number one. So secondly is we introduce a new provision such as duty to conduct risk assessment, a workers' right and OSH coordinator. And the third one is provision regarding the plant integrity, machinery requires certificate of fitness. The fourth one is we broaden the scope of occupational health by introducing occupational health services. And the last one, of course, we increase the maximum penalty about 10 times from 50,000 to 500,000 ringgit Malaysia. We hope that with this increment will give a deterrent effect to those who not comply with the law. And about the subsidiary legislation, because every act they have a subsidiary legislation, for the existing subsidiary legislation will remain enforced, and we will amend a certain area to streamline with the current technologies as well as to cater current issues in workplace. And as well as under the amendment of OSHA, the new regulation and guidance will be introduced to describe further the requirement of this new provision. So that's my, yeah.
Thank you very much, Poncelina. I think that was a very thorough compilation of some of the four main changes which actually the OSHA is going to have now. And of course, ever since the introduction of OSHA in 1994, workplace injuries, etc., fatalities have dramatically reduced. And it has definitely improved the quality of life in the workplace for pretty much most Malaysians. But at the same time, considering that, of course, we're now in 2024, other industries, in particular, the gig economy is also a very large part of working life, with close to 4.4 million Malaysians or so as part of the entire gig economy. Can I ask that whether the OSHA amendments also now include protection for gig economy workers? And if so, what would be the approach for extending such protections to those who are still not covered by OSHA?
Okay, thank you, Ms. Termina, for the good questions. As I mentioned just now, under the OSHA amendment, the coverage extends to all workplaces across the country. And this broader coverage will protect more workers and benefit approximately 15 million workers nationwide. And the coverage also include the gig worker. But since there is difficulties to establish the relationship between platform workers and platform provider, and among those debated is whether platform provider is an employer of the platform workers. Yeah? And under the OSHA, however, gig economy was classified as gig workers was classified as a self-employed person, and this means that they have an obligation under the Act to protect themselves and to ensure their work activity are safe and do not harm others who might be affected by their activity. So regarding the exemption from the application of OSHA means those who are not covered. The amendment lists three categories of them. Number one is domestic employment in relation to person employed, another, or is employed. For example, I'm employ my maid, and my maid is not covered under this amendment act. Because housewife activities is relatively low risk, it's just like housework, for example, for instance, cooking, washing, so ironing. That's why we exclude this scope of domestic employment from application of the act. The second one exemption that we give to the armed forces because they have a specific procedures instruction. And the third one is on a person who work on board ship because they are covered under Merchant Shipping Ordinance. Yeah, Merchant Shipping Ordinance. However, to inculcate safety and health culture, okay, DOSH continuously promote awareness through social media platform. For instance, Facebook, TikTok, the platform favored by the young generation, and seasonal campaign such as World OSH Day, OSH Week, and many more to reach all level of workers as well as the public.
Thank you. Thanks very much for explaining that in great detail, Ponsalina. And I think what is quite interesting that I'd like to pick up on from over there, as you mentioned, why the very good example of domestic work, such as what domestic workers do around Malaysian homes, we also understand that the amendments now include a new provision, and this provides the right of employees to remove themselves from imminent danger in the workplace. Could you please elaborate what exactly this new provision might entail, especially perhaps with a helpful example to illustrate this in potential action?
Okay. One of the reasons we amend the OSHA is to ensure that Malaysian OSH legislation align with the standard observed in developed nation and enable Malaysia to rectify ILO Convention C155. And therefore, the amendment introduced the workers' right provision under Section 26A, which grant workers the right to withdraw from the workplace if there is an imminent danger that could affect their safety and health. Okay, this provision align with the requirement of Article 13 of the Occupational Safety and Health Convention 1981. The number is 155. To guide both parties, the employer and the employee, especially the employee using their right to remove themselves if there is an imminent danger, DOSH has published workers' right guidance to avoid this provision being misused and to create harmonized working environment. That's why we do to make sure both parties understand how to use this, what we call a workers' right. That's my explanation, Amina.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Ponsalina. And perhaps one last interesting area of elaboration. Now, the OSHA Act now also introduces the role of the OSH coordinator. Would you be able to elaborate on what exactly this would entail, having an OSH coordinator in the workplace, how often the frequency of their visits, or are they actually situated within the zone of employment, and how this introduction of the role can actually reduce OSH risks?
Okay, as I said just now, the underlying principle and philosophy of the Occupational Safety and Health Act is place the responsibility for managing risk squarely on those who create them. And the designation of the OSH coordinator is not intended to absolve the employer of their responsibility as stipulated under the legislation. Rather, this is aimed at to facilitate the employer to execute their responsibility under the Act and to coordinate OSH matters within the workplace. This is the role of OSH coordinator. Among others, number one is to assist the employer, to any activities or to any person who give the responsibility in the workplace regarding measures to ensure the safety and health for the employees. That is the number one roles of OSH coordinator. Secondly is the OSH coordinator roles are to carry out the workplace inspection. So aiding the employee in carry out workplace inspection to assess the potential hazard posed by the machinery, equipment, material, processes, or any work in the workplace that could result in bodily harm to the employee. That's why the role of OSH coordinator is very important, so that the employer can achieve their responsibility under the Act. Other than that, the OSH coordinator also supporting employer to conducting a risk assessment. The new provision that we introduce under the amendment is the responsibility of employer to conduct the risk assessment. So from the risk assessment, we will identify what are the control measures should be implement in place so that we can reduce the potential of accident or occupational diseases to happen in the workplace. And lastly is to report any dangerous occurrence any occupational accident, any occupational disease to DOSH so that we can do the investigation and make sure the employer will do the correction and to prevent the same accident from occurrence. So with regard to whether we have a sufficient OSH coordinator to meet the demand, it is not an issue actually, because the requirement under the law with regard to OSH coordinator is the employer have to appoint one of the employee to act as the OSH coordinator. So the most probable employee who had a good knowledge in OSH will be appointed as a OSH coordinator to help employer to comply with the law. And DOSH believe that the appointment of OSH coordinator can aid employee in effectively managing risk and reducing workplace accident and occupational disease within their workplace. That
Fantastic.
is the role of, yeah.
Thank you very much, Ponsalina, for helping to explain in great detail, actually, what exactly these new OSHA Amendments Act entail overall. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much.
Well, we take a quick break on that note. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with Niaga Spot. Welcome back. You're still watching Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausji. Now, still on the topic of occupational safety and health in tandem, also the 112th session of the International Labour Conference, or ILC 2024, is also happening from 3rd to the 14th of June in Geneva, Switzerland, where Malaysia is, of course, also a participant as a signatory. Now, the conference sets international labour standards and broad policies of the International Labour Organization. These fundamental principles and rights at work, of course, include safety and health at work as embodied in ILO Conventions 155 and Convention 187, as well as what ratification of ILO Conventions actually entails. Natsu Nogami, Technical Advisor with Labour Law and Industrial Relations Reform for ILO Malaysia, joins me now online to discuss a little further. Good morning, Natsu. How are you doing? Thank you so much for making time to join us on Niaga Spotlight.
Good morning. Thank you for having me today.
Fantastic. Natsu, could I get started off by you perhaps elaborating in detail what is actually ILO's quite often unseen role in the working lives of people everywhere?
Thank you for the opportunity to introduce ourselves. So the ILO, the International Labour Organization, is a specialized agency of the United Nations, the only tripartite body which brings together not only governments, but employers and workers of all ILO member states. Now we have 187 member states. ILO was created in 1919 in the aftermath of the World War I, with the realization that the universal and lasting peace cannot be accomplished without social justice. And our mandates are to set international labor standards and to develop policies and programs to promote decent work for all. And as you said, Ms. Demina, International Labor Conference get together, our member states get together, government and employers and workers get together. It's called, otherwise known as International Parliament of Labor. Our ILO members discuss key issues and
adopt international labor standards and monitor their implementation. And this year, it's already started last week, and it continues into this week, next week.
That's right, exactly. So it's very interesting also that everything which is going to be coming out of ILC 24 will also be having some interesting new indexes, such as ILO specialists, they have devised a new index called Job Gap to make up for some issues that we are not very much aware of just yet. There are also some other interesting committees, such as the Recurrent Discussion Committee on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Works, which will be examining the impact of multiple and interdependent crises and how they actually affect implementation of fundamental principles and rights at work. Now, speaking about fundamental principles and rights at work, Natsu, these of course include safety and health at work as embodied in ILO Convention 155 and also Convention 187. But before we go into what these conventions are about, could you kindly please share with us first the quite complex mode of what it entails to actually ratify any ILO convention by a member country?
Definitely. So international labor standards are legal instruments drawn up by the ILO tripartite constituents and set out basic principles and rights at work. They can be either convention or protocol or recommendations. Conventions or protocols are legally binding international treaties that may be ratified by member states, whereas recommendations are not serve as non-binding guidelines. Normally, one subject, if there's an Occupational Safety and Health Convention, there's accompanying recommendation that provides guidance to implement the convention. So these conventions and recommendations are set, but the legally binding is the convention. And when a member state ratifies a convention, it generally comes into force for that country 1 year after the date of ratification. And ratifying countries undertake to apply the convention in national law and practice, and to report to the ILO on its application at regular intervals. And technical assistance is provided by the ILO, people like us in the field and also in Geneva. If the country needs assistance in implementing a convention, we provide that technical assistance. By ratifying fundamental conventions on occupational safety and health, Convention 155 and Convention 187, member states will demonstrate, first, their commitment to respect and promote safety and health as a fundamental principle and right at work, and create and maintain safe and healthy workplace where workers are protected against safety and health hazards and risks, and promote continuously a national preventative safety and health culture. If you would like, I can also say more specifically about what Convention 155 ratification entails.
Yes, please. I think we would really appreciate that, particularly as, of course, the nature of work has also changed quite rapidly ever since the past 30 years, whereby Malaysia actually first introduced the OSHA in Malaysia itself. I would love for you to do that.
Definitely. Malaysia ratified 187 before, and I think Ms. Alina said that they will be ratifying 155 as well, which is a fantastic news. And we have been working very closely with them. So the 155, Convention 155, when it's ratified by a country, there are a lot of things that the country, the government, not only the government, but the employers and workers and any other people who are involved have the obligations and rights. So let me start with the national level. First of all, a ratifying government must formulate, implement, and not only that, periodically review a coherent national policy on OSH. It is very important to review regularly to make sure that the emerging or new risks in health are properly addressed. And the government also identify arrangements on the measures to be taken for the policy implementation and enforcement as well, and coordination between authorities and bodies, and provision of a guidance to employers and workers. And at the workplace level,
to ensure that the working environment is safe and without risk to health. So the risk assessment is very important, and risk mitigation, of course. And the workers and their representatives also have responsibility, which is to
respect and follow the instructions on safety and health given by the employers. And they also have, of course, rights and duties to cooperate with the employer, as I said, and they receive adequate information and training from the employers on safety and health, and to have the right to inquire and to be consulted on all aspects of safety and health. And when there is an imminent and serious danger, workers and their representatives must report to the employer, and they have to be able to remove themselves from the risk and without any consequences. For example, disciplinary measures or dismissal. So those are the rights and responsibilities of all parties. Yes.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Natsu, for actually emphasizing how it is indeed a closed loop if adhered to and followed appropriately. Now, going into deeper detail, perhaps, Natsu. Now, OSH provisions and protections for workers against hazards, and in particular, platform economy, or as we know it more colloquially, the gig economy workers. What should these ideally entail, particularly concerning the sometimes tumultuous nature of gig work, such as, for example, example, ride delivery and ride sharing?
Definitely. The ILO so far does not have an official definition of platform economy or gig worker, but let me give you a general understanding of this platform economy, which is a digital service that facilitates interactions between two or more sets of users, who could be firms or individuals, who interact through the service via the internet. So I understand that in Malaysia, when you say gig economies, people think mostly about e-hailing and p-hailing drivers. So that is fine. And these people definitely have safety and health risks, road safety and exposure to heat. And not only those physical risks, they also have psychosocial risks, such as stress, anxiety, exhaustion, and depression, because we understand that the platform workers are often subject to rating system by customers and to their algorithmic decisions, which determine the platform workers' activities. But this rating system often don't have a feedback, the mechanism for the workers to appeal when there is unfair evaluations. And these kind of things increase workers' stress and anxiety. And also expending excessive amounts of time logged on in order to find sufficient work can increase the physical risk to eye problems or cardiovascular problems, and because of the physical inactivity. And exposure to violence and harassment has also been reported. Now, in many countries in the world, platform workers are either entirely or partially excluded from safety and health protection because of their classification as self-employed workers or own-account workers, because labor law normally applies to employees, but the Occupational Safety and Health Act could apply to workers beyond the employees. Now, self-employed workers generally have limited resources to meet employer obligations, such as risk assessment and risk mitigation. And in some cases, they are not even aware of their legal obligations with respect to their own safety and health. Many countries in the ILO member states take different approaches to protecting the safety and health of platform workers. For instance, some countries specifically extended their existing national legislation on safety and health to the platform workers, whether they're employed or whether they're self-employed. It does not matter. The OSH protection can be extended. Where other countries develop administrative regulations or guidelines to require, for example, platforms provide access to toilets for delivery with drivers, for example. And not only the government regulation or law, it is very importantly, collective agreements between employers and workers are used in other countries. For example, so far, the collective agreements have been concluded between certain platforms and trade union federations and confederations to extend safety and health protection to platform workers. For example, collective agreements on road safety training and equipment, or suspension of order deliveries in the event of unsafe weather conditions. So it is also up to the employers and workers to decide the conditions that concern the safety and health of the platform workers. And actually, we will learn more about the other countries' experiences in the next ILC next June.
Absolutely. And it's also very interesting to note that locally speaking, at least in the Malaysian ecosystem, when it comes to the gig economy, Grab has indeed recently gone forward with sponsorship of insurance for over 180,000 e-hailing and p-hailing drivers, which is a good start as any. Natsu, thank you so very much for your time and insights. I do think we learned quite a bit about what will be happening in the forthcoming months, and we wish you and the ILO all the very best with the remaining proceedings for ILC 2024. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Fantastic. Well, that's all we have time for today. This has been Niaga Spotlight with me, Tamina Kausji. We'll see you next Friday with more business analysis and insights. Here's to a productive week ahead.